We both know why you're here, and that's to talk about the next Fallout.
There goes the neighborhood.
The numerous problems faced by Fallout 76, both at and since launch, have been well documented. There were issues like bugs, poor reviews, data breaches revealing player information, and even problems with several promotional items, including one with mold in a helmet.
You serious?
Yes, that was a thing. And all of those are just some of the things that have caused a much unwanted headache for Bethesda. And while some of those problems I just mentioned may make really interesting topics for future videos, there was one event that seemed not only to shine an even brighter light on the misgivings of Fallout 76, but also brought back to the surface old rumours of bad blood between two giants of the RPG industry, Obsidian Entertainment and Bethesda. Hello, I'm Roy McCoy, and in this video we'll look at how the announcement of Obsidian's The Outer Worlds in 2018 resurrected rumours of ill feeling that have apparently lingered since 2010. Through the course of this video we'll look at where that bad blood came from. And no, I'm not talking about the Taylor Swift song. So if that's your thing, sorry. We'll also be looking at the fallout from the Outer Worlds announcement, the reception of the two games, and finally, we'll talk about the current ownership of both companies, an irony that can only truly be appreciated by the 2020 vision afforded to us by hindsight. Now, without any further ado, let's begin. Prologue. Who are the players? When mentioned, the names Bethesda and Obsidian Entertainment conjure up a long list of great games and franchises. Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic 2, Elder Scrolls games like Morrowind, Oblivion and Skyrim, Pillars of Eternity, Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, the list goes on and on. While the two companies are effectively impossible not to talk about during a conversation about RPGs, they have both had rather different fortunes. While the developer Bethesda Game Studios has seen its reputation somewhat tarnished of late by titles such as Fallout 76, the success of their publishing arm, Bethesda Softworks, bringing out titles such as Doom, Wolfenstein and The Evil Within, meant that it stayed relatively unscathed by financial uncertainty. The same, sadly, cannot be said for Obsidian Entertainment, with cancelled titles and a missed bonus that some say caused the rumoured bad blood, contributing to their woes. However, these issues will be spoken about more later on in the video, as it's necessary at this point to talk about who Obsidian were, rather than who they are now. Obsidian Entertainment were founded in 2003 by key ex-employees of Black Isle Studios, including Fergus Urquhart and Chris Avallone. The studio, which became defunct in 2003, were famous for having worked on games including Planetscape Torment, Icewind Dale, and most importantly, the first two Fallout games. While Black Isle Studios were the developers of those two early isometric classics, the rights for the Fallout franchise at this point were owned by Interplay Entertainment, who later sold those rights and ended up in a legal battle over them with Bethesda, a story that will be touched on briefly later, but may make for a very interesting other video, and ironically involves a different MMO in the Fallout universe. But back to Obsidian. Over the years, other employees who worked on the first Fallout games, such as Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky, joined the company under the stewardship of CEO Fergus Urquhart, who was the director of the first Fallout game. Obsidian mainly built their reputation as an RPG giant by creating sequels to established franchises, the follow-up to KOTOR in 2004, the second Neverwinter Nights in 2006, and of course, how could we forget, Fallout New Vegas in 2010. So, now the players in this story have been named. Let's move on to Chapter 1, The Fallout from 76. Our story begins on May the 30th, 2018. A 24-hour stream preceded a trailer for Fallout 76, which, while not giving away too many details about what the game entailed, seemed to suggest from the music that it would take place in West Virginia, in Vault 76, and could possibly serve as a prequel to the other entries in the series. While Fallout 4 had been widely critically well received, there were some fans who felt that Bethesda was moving the franchise away from its core RPG roots and replacing it with a slightly more linear form of storytelling, combined with the fact that a dated engine had somewhat held it back. Debates still rage as to whether Number 3 or New Vegas was the better Fallout game, but rarely included the fourth entry into the series as a contender. If those few concerns of a change of direction were there before, after Todd Howard's presentation at E3 2018, in which he described Fallout 76 in more detail, those concerns had certainly become more substantial afterwards.
Fallout 76 is entirely online.
In response to the announcements made by the head of Bethesda Studio that this would be a solely multiplayer experience, petitions were launched that garnered thousands of signatures within hours to encourage Bethesda to include a single-player experience. Fallout 76 was the game that seemingly not that many people wanted. However, up until its release on November the 14th, 2018, there was still a quiet optimism from a vast number of gamers that Bethesda could pull it off. While fans longed for a single-player experience in the form of Fallout 5, and there were those who felt Fallout 4 had missed a beat, Bethesda still had the trust of fans. Comparing that untouchable reputation of what came before that release, and the overall sentiment to anything with Bethesda's name on it since, is something that we could definitely talk about in the comments below. And after the game's release, Bethesda seemed to go into firefighting mode, fixing issues including bugs, so-called in-game cheating, and a host of other problems. And then, an announcement came, the timing of which could be seen as both opportune for Obsidian Entertainment and most unfortunate for Bethesda. And it is this announcement that seemingly brought back into the news all of that old, rumoured bad blood that existed between the two RPG giants. Chapter 2, a timely/untimely announcement. At the Game Awards 2018 in December, just over 2 weeks after Fallout 76's fateful launch, Obsidian Entertainment announced their project, The Outer Worlds, an action RPG that was set in an alternate timeline in space. After several disappointing RPGs such as Fallout 76 and Mass Effect Andromeda, fans of the genre were looking for the next big thing, and found something to get behind in this project.
Could you have timed that announcement trailer any better?
It was purely accidental.
While not the AAA title that most people were hoping for, it still looked like an exceptionally interesting title. People working on the game included Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky, both of whom had worked on Fallout New Vegas and the original two isometric games when the franchise rights were still owned by Interplay. No, I haven't forgotten to talk about that, that's coming. So, at a time when people were worried about the future of the Fallout franchise, the original creators of the series had just announced a new first-person RPG, and while the gameplay and environment looked incredibly Fallout-esque, and seemed to be a return to the core mechanics that had made New Vegas so popular, there were two slides in that announcement trailer that received particular attention. The point that this trailer made reference to the fact that they were both the creators of the original and New Vegas games seemed not only to try and give them kudos, but led to some fans speculating that Obsidian were poking fun at Bethesda, a point even referenced on Twitter by former Obsidian employee Chris Avallone. A quick-fire interview with Game Informer added fuel to the excitement fire and led some to reinforce the opinion that Obsidian were mocking Bethesda and the misfortunes of Fallout 76. In particular, during a time after the release when microtransactions and expensive prices in the Atom Store were coming under scrutiny, the answer to this question was particularly referenced.
Will there be microtransactions?
Hell no.
However, if you do watch this interview, and I will put the link in the comments below, for me it shows that the team had true passion. They referenced the Fallout genetics and the experience that runs through the department.
What percentage of this team worked on Fallout New Vegas?
20%?
What percentage of the team worked on Fallout 1 and 2?
3%.
I like it. Specific.
Leave it to the programmer to know the percentages.
And gave open and honest answers about the project that were both witty and informative. And while the moment could have been seen to be banter or just clever marketing, what happened next led to apologies and denials. Chapter 3, The Announcement Fallout. With the problems faced by Bethesda and Fallout 76, some fans used the announcement as ammo to attack Bethesda, with some even demanding the rights to the franchise be given back so that finally a New Vegas 2 could be realised. And it's no secret that people have wanted that game for many years. Of course, I will talk about that later in the final section. Now, while Obsidian moved quickly to deny that they had deliberately tried to antagonise or attack Bethesda, it was certain elements of the promotion that led fans to think that they were. 1. The fact that there were no microtransactions when Fallout 76 had them. Number 2. The general theme of the game was anti-big corporations, and I'm not even going to justify why that's relevant. Number 3. The two statements in the trailer about being the original creators, and number 4. It was a single-player RPG experience that seemingly had much in common with New Vegas, while Fallout 76 was Fallout 76. However, Obsidian have gone on the record several times as saying it wasn't their intention to encourage the so-called bashing of Bethesda. The CEO of Obsidian, Fergus Urquhart, stated as much in an interview with Game Informer, and I quote from the article when I say, Urquhart says he's surprised that some people assumed the team at Obsidian would know back in 2015 when they started working on the Outer Worlds that the game's announcement would line up with the negative reaction toward Bethesda's Fallout 76 at the end of 2018. He said, people even said things about our trailer. Oh man, just slamming it home to Bethesda, because we said the original creators of Fallout and the makers of Fallout New Vegas. We had storyboards from July that said that. He went on to say, I have no ill will for Bethesda. I love playing Fallout games. We're not fighting for the same dollars. And he does make an interesting point there. There is no way that in 2015 that Obsidian could have predicted the negative reception of Bethesda's Fallout 76 3 years later. However, he went on to say, this isn't meant to be negative. It can probably be taken as negative. We really enjoyed making Fallout New Vegas, and people really enjoy Fallout New Vegas, Urquhart says. Bethesda is looking to take the Fallout brand in a different direction. There's nothing right or wrong about that. That's their choice. They own it. They get to do what they want with it. But in our mind, there are people that enjoy where Fallout was. That is what we wanted to do with the Outer Worlds, to give people that. And you know what? Maybe that's a bad decision from the standpoint of the number of people that will buy it. I don't know. People seem to really enjoy what Fallout New Vegas was, so let's give them an experience that's as similar as we can to that. However, it was an interview with the Outer Worlds co-directors Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky who went on to say why they're not happy with fans attacking Bethesda's work.
I remember telling a friend of mine it's disheartening when your game is used to tear down another game. When people aren't excited because your game is going to exist, they're excited because your game is going to show up another game.
As we said before, making games is very hard. No one sets out to make a bad game.
And I have to say, I kind of agree. No developer ever sets out to make a bad game. And if we're totally honest, using the Outer Worlds to bash Fallout is not appreciating the Outer Worlds for what it truly is. And on another note, I have to say that both Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky once again come across as being genuinely nice people. However, many of the fans didn't just draw on the fact that they were the original creators of Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 76 was having a hard time. They looked instead at some of that rumoured bad blood that I mentioned earlier. But about that rumoured bad blood that I mentioned, where did it come from? Chapter 4. The Good, the Bad, and the Bad Blood. Bethesda started work on the Fallout 3 we know and love in 2004. Initially leasing the rights from Interplay, with the agreement also giving room for sequels. In 2007, when Interplay were facing bankruptcy, Bethesda decided that purchasing the rights to the series would be a savvy investment. But at this point, they only purchased the rights to the single-player experience of Fallout, with Interplay retaining the Fallout MMO rights. While that story will be touched on later in this chapter, it's first time to address how the rumoured bad blood between Obsidian and Bethesda came to be. We first need to quickly talk about something called Van Buren. The fact that Bethesda started work on Fallout 3 in 2004 does have some significance. At the start of this video, we talked about the founding of Obsidian Entertainment following the closure of Black Owl Studios in 2003. This closure was due to financial issues faced by Black Owl's parent company, Interplay. While the rest is history and the team that made up Black Owl moved on, many of whom founded or worked at Obsidian, it is most important to note the games that ended up being cancelled as a result of the shutdown. Baldur's Gate 3, The Black Hound, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 3, and a title called Van Buren. So, what's so significant about Van Buren? Well, it was the working-in-progress title for the first iteration of Fallout 3, meaning that at the time of their closure, Black Owl Studios were working on a Fallout 3. While that subject will make an interesting topic for a future video, it's important to state at this point that Bethesda's Fallout 3 did not use any of the assets of work previously conducted on Black Owl's version, and they built their game from scratch. Also, while it's very sad that we didn't see much of what Black Owl had made, other than a leaked tech demo in 2007, the closure and cancellation has nothing to do with Bethesda, and it is not the source of the rumoured bad blood. Before we continue, I need to say that some elements of Van Buren did get referenced by Obsidian in Fallout New Vegas, such as a mention of the NCR Brotherhood of Steel War, a companion called Joshua Graham, and the Caesar's Legion faction. However, Now let's talk about the success of Fallout 3. When it released in 2008, it was a critical and commercial success and went on to win awards. And like I always say, when a game sells well, we almost always get a sequel. However, this time, Bethesda decided that rather than working on the title in-house, they would contract another studio to work on the project due to the fact they were working on Skyrim. And who better than the original creators, or the studio that founded out of them, Obsidian Entertainment. Thus, a deal was struck, and in 2010 we got the superb Fallout New Vegas, which was also a critical and commercial success. But if the game was so well received, and Obsidian had expressed interest in making a sequel, what went wrong, and where does the rumoured bad blood come from? Well, it all came from the contract. Now, before I go into this, I must state that the ill feeling has just been rumoured, with many people moving to state that there is no bad blood or rivalry, and there's not much substantial evidence to confirm it. So, let's first talk about the facts we actually know. The New Vegas contract that was signed by Obsidian and Bethesda was for a straight payment with a potential bonus. To be clear, royalties were not on the table. It is this bonus that is the source of the rumoured ill feeling. The bonus was based on the Metacritic score the finished product received. If the game achieved a score of 85 or more, the bonus would be paid. Sadly for Obsidian, the game managed a score of 84, 1 point lower than the required amount, therefore missing out on the bonus. After that, but possibly not due to the bonus, Obsidian ended up in financial trouble and there were layoffs. There were other factors at play, such as cancelled titles. It is also important to state that a bonus, while sometimes very necessary, cannot be counted on, and it was a legally binding contract which meant Bethesda had no obligation to pay. In fact, on Twitter, Chris Avellone stated that Bethesda offered the bonus rather than it being requested. And when interviewed by IGN, Fergus Urquhart said this in relation to the bonus.
We're not the ones who put that bonus structure in there. We pretty much, to be honest, I never looked at it as something, we weren't depending upon it. It does feel a little petty to not give us, but that's me personally, and,
Sure.
I think it's not an unfair statement that, hopefully Bethesda doesn't think it's too unfair for me to say that. But on the flip side, it was the contract and we didn't ask for it, right? So it makes it a harder thing to go back and forth on. Now what I can say is that that and I think other times where we've been affected by those things, we just say we're not going to make anything in our deal tied to something that isn't representative of the product being successful.
But the rumours of ill feeling linger on, and some have stated that the short amount of time allocated by Bethesda, 2008 to 2010, meant that New Vegas was subject to a lot of crunch, and some feel that the team weren't given enough time to polish the product. But Bethesda's handling of outsourcing and contracts was not the only topic of debate that rose from this situation. Many fans started to attack the way in which Metacritic works. Their scores are based on a system out of 100. There's often speculation that some reviews and sites skew the results more than others. But the biggest issue is that if a reviewer works on a scale of 1 to 10, an 8 is counted as an 80. So all the 8 out of 10s and 4s out of 5s end up dragging the total score down. The fact that the bonus hinged on a score on Metacritic that seemingly had faults brought to light what some referred to as the failings of the Metacritic scoring system. Whether or not any or all of this ended up in bad blood or ill feeling is open to interpretation, but rumours of a rivalry have persisted ever since, which resurfaced during the announcement of The Outer Worlds. That said, Obsidian have expressed a desire since 2010 to work on another Fallout property, which would have potentially put them back under contract of Bethesda. The chances of that became less likely in 2018, when Todd Howard said that it was still a possibility, but not as likely as it had once been. So, all of this, combined with the timing of the announcement of The Outer Worlds, and not forgetting the trailer of Avowed, an upcoming first-person fantasy RPG by Obsidian, which seemingly lays down the gauntlet of challenge to the Elder Scrolls franchise, have all stoked these rumours over the years. And what about that previously mentioned legal battle between Bethesda and Interplay over the Fallout rights? As I said, this will make an excellent topic for a future video, but for now we'll touch on it briefly. When Interplay faced an uncertain financial future again in 2010, they moved to change their deal with Bethesda and sold the rights to the Fallout franchise. However, they decided to hold on to the MMO rights after Bethesda balked at the price of the full rights. But in the contract of sale of the single-player right, Bethesda allowed Interplay to work on an MMO, eventually named Fallout Online, on the condition that it was completed in a certain timescale that some say was too tight. If the game was not completed, or going as planned, the rights for the MMO would pass back to Bethesda for free. Safe to say that considering we haven't really heard of Fallout Online, the rights defaulted, and after some legal battles that I will cover in a future video, it eventually paved the way for what we now know as Fallout 76. Contemplate that fact over your next cup of coffee. But now let's talk about the results of these two games. Chapter 5: When the Dust Had Settled. While Obsidian Entertainment's The Outer Worlds performed well both critically and commercially, shipping over 2.5 million copies and winning numerous awards, it was widely acknowledged that the game sat between the standard of a AA and AAA title. The Metacritic score on PS4 and Xbox One sits at an ironic 85, while the PC is slightly behind on 82. Most of the critics praised the writing, storytelling, and voice acting. The negative comments related to the lack of innovative enemies, simplistic combat, and the wooden way in which characters stood there while you engaged with them. But, as I said, it sold well and received good scores, also later getting some DLC. On a personal note, I want to say that on the whole, I enjoyed the experience of The Outer Worlds. It was a solid first-person RPG, but obviously wasn't the AAA experience I had been truly looking for. My playthrough of the main game and DLC has led me to start work on a critique of the game that I will hopefully publish in the upcoming weeks. So I would love very much to know what you think about The Outer Worlds in the comments, and let's have a chat about it. But back to the facts surrounding the release of these two games. It is fundamentally impossible to tell whether the apparent shortcomings of Fallout 76 impacted on sales of The Outer Worlds in any way. However, regarding the timing of The Outer Worlds release, something interesting happened. Just a few days before The Outer Worlds launched, an announcement came from Bethesda: the introduction of a paid subscription model for Fallout 76 called Fallout First, priced at a substantial fee of $99 per year or $12.99 per month. While it did include a private server, there were some who criticised the choice to release a subscription model and was considered a surprisingly risky and bold move from Bethesda, particularly as the much requested private servers were now included behind a paywall. I'll move on from this now, but safe to say it will make a very interesting topic for a future video. There is also an ironic moment in the development history of The Outer Worlds, which contributes to an even bigger irony that I'll touch on in Chapter 6. That was the purchase of Obsidian Entertainment by Microsoft during the development cycle. The two co-directors of The Outer Worlds responded with this comment when Game Informer asked what it meant for them.
Has the Microsoft purchase affected this game at all?
No.
No.
What was the best part about selling out to Microsoft? Was it the money?
We don't think it's ironic at all that we're making this game and now we're owned by Microsoft.
While Microsoft's backing does potentially mean that Obsidian could potentially make bigger, more expensive games in the future, it also needs mentioning that due to existing agreements and contracts, The Outer Worlds and its DLC still appeared on the PS4, possibly down to a combination on Microsoft's part of good business practice and wishing to avoid any complications over pre-existing contracts. But it does ironically mean Microsoft made a game for the PS4. And what of Fallout 76? As mentioned at the start of this video, there were numerous issues. In-game cheating, bugs, and more bugs, a perceived expensive in-game store, merchandising problems, and the list goes on and on. The highest Metacritic score was on the PS4, coming in at 55. And while some DLC and expansions have been added since, with some fans saying that it has improved, it's the release that we must talk about, and some of the reviews were quite blunt. Forbes called it a historically bad launch and questioned whether it was worth saving. The Guardian said it was a pointless walk in the post-apocalypse. Eurogamer said it should be considered as a failed experiment. Newsweek went on to say that near constant performance issues and poorly executed game systems that it impacted on their enjoyment. PC World said that it would not be a great game to them even if it functioned properly. Sadly, the bad reviews just kept coming, but I'll stop there as it gives you a fair idea of what was said. And before we move on, I want to say that I would genuinely like to talk with people about the state of this game now. I'd love to know whether you think, coming up to 3 years on, it's worth a walk in the MMO wastelands. But now let's move on to the final chapter. Chapter 6, The Present and Future Fallout. At the start of this video, I mentioned there was a beautiful irony in this history that can only be appreciated in hindsight. In 2020, when Microsoft announced the proposed purchase of Bethesda's parent company ZeniMax Media for $7.5 billion, a new and interesting scenario was proposed. While many amongst us debated whether or not games from the Fallout, Doom, Wolfenstein or Elder Scrolls universe would be Xbox exclusives, some fans of Fallout New Vegas were quick to suggest that for the first time in 11 years, a New Vegas 2 was finally truly possible. These two giants of the RPG world will find themselves as subsidiaries of the same tech giant, Microsoft. Those years of rumoured bad blood, if they indeed were true, could soon become an irrelevance as these two companies find themselves under the same umbrella. When asked whether the deal meant a New Vegas 2 could happen, Obsidian merely shrugged, which could be interpreted in a number of ways. 1. We don't know. 2. We're not telling. Or 3. It's not up to us. It's in the hands of Bethesda and Microsoft. Whether or not Microsoft has to take a play nicely children, play nicely approach to these two companies, it is not outside the realms of possibility that we could see Obsidian working on that much wanted sequel to the 2010 game, with Microsoft effectively brokering a deal between the two RPG giants over the rights. But the fact now that both Obsidian and Bethesda have the support of Microsoft, and speculation about what could happen with all the rights that are now under one umbrella, is something we could chat about in the comments. I personally would love to see a New Vegas 2, and if current rumours about Obsidian's secret games are true, that's exactly what we could see. However, that brings us to the end of this video about this interesting moment in gaming history. I just want to say a big thanks for watching, and this is Roy McCoy, out.